he just went low. He's in his head. He's in his head. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's my Mantis Runner back again with another episode of How's My Team. First off, I would like to apologise on the quality of last week's video. Obviously it being late, but also having a few technical issues. Obviously some of those I can't control, but video corruption, doing the video very late, so many things going wrong, and my camera not recording some footage as well. I'm looking down, but I'm watching the Titans Roosters NRLW game because that's just started. So this is recording on the Saturday, at least this first part. But we have a few things to talk about, including obviously the game with the Titans women versus the Roosters. We've obviously got the Titans up against the Rabbitohs in the second Spoonbowl of the year, and we also have to talk about the Giants going down to Canberra to play against North Melbourne, all on this Sunday. So pretty action-packed, and then obviously actually ending with the Community Shield game for Liverpool versus Crystal Palace. So going to be very, very important and very big week this week. So without further ado, let's get started with this episode of How's My Team, and start with whatever game comes first. I'd say it'd be the Titans women at this point, but we'll see how we go in terms of recording. So it's Monday morning. I am a little bit tired because obviously I was not feeling well last night, but we will talk about the Titans women first. They played relatively okay, but it was a 24-8 loss to the Roosters at home in the first game of the doubleheader. Titans actually scored first, so they actually were up 4-0 in the first 10-15 minutes. But after that, it was like the Roosters kind of switched on after that initial try. In the first 6 minutes of the game, 6 minutes and 25 seconds in, we had Pauline Pillay-Rossambale come in and score, and then obviously the first try from the Roosters was 6 minutes later. So they played relatively well. I think the fact that the defence actually kind of kept up a little bit, especially towards the second half as well. For about half the game, they didn't actually score at all, the Roosters, despite how much pressure the Titans were putting on their opponents, but also themselves, with a few errors, but also a few errors crept in to the Roosters game. Obviously, the Roosters still stay undefeated on top of the ladder, but unfortunately, that means that the Titans women dropped down. Pressed the wrong button. So they went down to 9th, with the fact that the Sharks and the Warriors both won, including the Warriors who won on Saturday afternoon as well. So both all the Dogs, the Titans, and the Eels all dropped because it was a pretty good win for the Warriors in very, very wet conditions. We'll add over the Bulldogs. So for and against is minus 48. Obviously going into the next game, which is obviously against the Sharks, which I believe that should be a Sharks home game. Yes, it is. So it'll be a double header on the Saturday for the Sharks at home against the Titans men and Titans women. Obviously the women's game coming first, and then the men's coming later, and we'll talk about the men very, very shortly. But yeah, so ultimately they did relatively well against a team that obviously was going to be very hard to beat. Then ultimately, the Roosters did what they had to do, but they didn't do it as convincing as some of the other games that they have so far, because their for and against is at 108 right now. I think they played the Canberra Raiders already, because the Raiders obviously are still last with a minus 166 on their total, but they definitely have played the Tigers already and beat the Tigers pretty convincingly last week. But yeah, so it's a double header with the Sharks next week on Saturday, early Saturday afternoon for the women, and a few hours later for the men. But scored the first try, and they end up scoring the last try. Phoenix, I forget what her last name is. Phoenix, let me have a look. Phoenix Rane Hippie, I think. I'm not sure if that's how that's pronounced, but yeah, so she was debuting in yesterday's game, and she scored on debut. So props to her, obviously. It was a pretty good try. I thought that the centre had actually gone out over the sideline, but they had passed it back in from going out. Didn't actually step out, and they passed it in just before they stepped out, and ended up being a fantastic try and a fantastic individual effort, because obviously she was still probably about 5-10 minutes, between 5 and 10 minutes away from the try line, and had to beat like 2 or 3 players to get there and still get it down, which she almost didn't. She almost got held up. So credit to the defense, to the Sydney Roosters, but also great on the individual effort, and obviously the efforts from the other players that were involved in the try assist for that try. So unfortunately, yes, it's another loss, but against the ladder leaders and a team that has been undefeated so far, pretty good effort. I think that's 16 points, probably about where the difference is for the two sides at the moment. Obviously, you're talking about between 1st and 9th now. So 16 points seems pretty accurate. Ultimately, I will have to say that Jamie Chapman did go off with an injury. I was just in a situation of thinking then. I don't know if we've got any... we haven't got an article on it. I don't know what her status is at the moment, because she does have, I think, an ankle injury. I was actually editing a video while I was watching the game, so I'm not sure what the extent was, because obviously she did get injured while I was editing and watching the game without my headphones in. So I'm not sure what exactly was the issue in terms of an injury, but it did look like she was on crutches, which obviously doesn't help things, and it does seem like it was in a boot as well, but I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to have a look. In a row. See if I can find it. Draw Women's Championship. Latest. It's got the highlights in there. Does it say? Yeah, so it says that Jamie Chapman goes off, but it doesn't say what injury she got. Which is a bit of a bugger. Can I see it in here? Ah, there we go. Okay, casualty ward, that's better. Yeah, ankle injury. So I was correct. Yeah, so she were going to go scans for it. Oh, we lost our 5'8". Well, no wonder. We lost our 5'8" and we lost our fullback with like 20, 30 minutes to go. So, yeah, so hamstring injury to obviously the first try scorer of the game, Pauline, was injured with a hamstring. And yes, Jamie Chapman went off with an ankle injury. So, not ideal. Obviously, Jamie Chapman's going to go for scans. Hopefully it's not a season ender because that would absolutely suck for the Titans and almost would throw their entire season basically down the drain at this point. So hopefully it's not as bad as it looked, but it looked pretty, it didn't look great. So hopefully it's not as bad as we think it is. But 24 points to 8 loss to the Sydney Roosters at home in the first game of the doubleheader on the Gold Coast for the Titans women. So we go from one loss to a disappointing loss. Yes, that means that the Titans lost in the second Spoonbowl against the Rabbitohs, 20 points to 18. And there's a few things that I can talk about from this game. Ultimately, of course, the high shot in the last probably 5-10 minutes against Jaden Campbell. If he stays down, ultimately, he probably would have been called for a high shot, but the referee completely missed it. And that shouldn't happen, especially when it is a high tackle. And not only that, I think he got hit high twice in that tackle as well from both players. There's a few things going on in this game, and ultimately I will say that Latrell possibly could have been on report for obviously Sam Verrill's last try to keep us in the game, who rushed off in the dummy half position and scored under the group and the markers from the previous tackle on Chris Randall, who got really close to scoring. But I will say that some of the effort was not there from some of the players. Ultimately, I think a lot more players played better today because usually a lot of them play terribly. We did have a couple of injuries. Obviously, Brian Kelly went off with failed HIA, so he's had a head injury assessment for a concussion. I think it was for a concussion because obviously that's usually how they use the head injury assessment is to check for concussion. He failed. I don't know whether it was category 1 or category 2, but he failed his test, so obviously he might be out next week. And Lofi Khan Pereira went off with some, I think it was hamstring tightness. He had ice on his hamstring pretty late towards the game, so ultimately I think it actually might have been halfway through the second half. I'm just picking up my charger. So Jojo Fafita ended up going to the wing. Jacob Alick Winky, I think is how they pronounce it. I'm not sure. But he went into the centres. Actually, Jojo actually went from one side of the field in the centre position to the other side. And I think maybe Chris Randall might have filled the other centre position. But it was an alright performance. Ultimately, Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs scored a double. Didn't score a hat-trick this time around, because he usually does against the Titans, but he has a pretty good track record in terms of try scoring against the Titans. So I think he's 3 tries away from the tying the all-time try scoring record, which has been held in that position for about, I think we're talking about 30, 40 years now at least, and it's on the cusp of being broken, which is crazy. So good on him, obviously, for getting much closer, and obviously I think possibly by the end of the season he should be able to get it, if not tie it, obviously. But yes, it was a loss in the Spoonbowl, which means that the Titans drop again to the bottom of the ladder after being off the bottom for a couple of weeks. And it's another heartbreaking loss again, because obviously since the Broncos game, which obviously was the 12 points, we've lost by 1 point, won by 8 points, by 8 points, then lost by 4 and lost by 2. So we've lost 3 games out of the last 4 by a try or less, by 4 points or less. And yeah, even if you extend it past the Broncos game, the bye, the Cowboys game as well, that's lost by a converted try, and then you go all the way back to the Eels, and then obviously the Broncos as well in the first game, and even the Storm in like 12 points there, obviously winning against the Sea Eagles by 20. But in the last month, I don't know where a win is going to come from, because obviously with the fact that the Eels won against the Cowboys by a single point yesterday means that it's either going to be the Titans or the Knights that are probably at the bottom of the ladder. Now the Knights are also 2 points ahead, but they have had all their byes, whereas obviously the Rabbitohs have not. So the Rabbits will go to 20 points. I think they have it in a couple of weeks' time, their last bye of the season. It's not next week. So, I don't know where a win is going to come from, because we go down, obviously, to the second game of the doubleheader at Shark Stadium, which obviously Shark Park, down in Cronulla, to play the Sharks in the 3 o'clock game, so it's the early game for the men. And then we go back home to play the Warriors, then to Suncorp, I believe. Yes, Suncorp Stadium against the Dolphins after that, and then playing at home in the last round against the Tigers. And that's possibly where the win could come from, could be the last round. And it could be against the Warriors at home, I don't know. But I don't know whether because ultimately at this point, the Sharks are playing to stay in the 8. They'll be playing next week, and they lost to the Dragons last week, so on the Saturday. So they're not going to be happy about that result, and possibly will try and turn it around at home. The Warriors are playing to get back into the top 4 the week after if they win next week. So, because they got pipped out with obviously a loss against the Bulldogs, but also with Penrith playing against Newcastle and winning pretty convincingly, they jump into the top 4, obviously with the extra point in hand for the draw against the Cowboys earlier this year. The Dolphins obviously are in the top 8 at the moment. They're in 8th, so they're right on the doorstep. They lost to the Roosters though, so they're very vulnerable from dropping out of the 8, but they're still there at the moment. And then obviously the Tigers are in 12th at the moment, obviously 6 points in front of us at the present moment, and possibly could be 8 points in front with the bye this week, I think, if not, it was last week. So don't know where a win is going to come from for this team, but it's pretty disappointing, especially at the start of that second half. They had pretty much the majority of the possession in what arguably would be the third quarter of the game, the first 20 minutes, obviously, of the second half. They just kept attacking, but they just couldn't score. And it was not a great result. Pretty disappointing in a game that they should have won realistically with the possession that they had. They just kept making mistakes, and the Rabbitohs kept making mistakes in their own right. And I'll give credit to some of their defense as well. obviously, to the Rabbitohs because they defended relatively well, especially in that 20 minutes where the Titans had had the majority of the possession in their game at that point. But they just couldn't get over the line, and when they did, obviously they got held up. So, yeah, so 2-point loss means that the Titans go back down to the bottom of the ladder in 17th and looking for a way out, trying to get out of the position for the wooden spoon, but they've basically got one hand on it right now with a month to go, and I don't know where that win is going to come from. But thankfully, it's not all doom and gloom this weekend. Didn't have every side obviously lose because the Giants ended up winning against North Melbourne. They did what they had to do. They had to win to get their finals hopes alive. And Melbourne almost gave us a one-up in actually making us make finals, actually, with the fact that they almost won against the Western Bulldogs, who unfortunately they ended up losing by 6 points. In that game in particular, and even West Coast got very close last night. It was a very close Sunday afternoon and night, but not for North Melbourne. But the Giants did win. They only won by 54 points, 133 to 79. Probably arguably one of their biggest wins in Canberra, I believe, off the top of my head. I don't remember the last couple of seasons being that high. In terms of wins there, because when we usually win there, we don't usually win by a lot. But it was 20 goals 13 to 12 goals 7, so 33 scoring shots to 19. At one stage it was over 10, 10 shots over for the Giants, but they kind of did score well towards the end of the game. But yeah. So with the percentage, obviously we do stay in 8th. I think we jumped about 3%. I think it ended up being in the game. So we still stay in 8th. Obviously the Western Bulldogs are still a win out of the 8. On 52 points, we are on 56 points, but on the same amount of points as Hawthorn. And the Suns, obviously the Suns have got an extra game in hand against Essendon, which now that has been confirmed that they will be playing on, I believe they're playing, the Suns are playing on the Saturday, obviously this week coming up, against the Giants at home in the second game of the Expansion Cup, but will also be playing on the Saturday afterwards and then the Wednesday that next week against Essendon. So I believe that obviously they played Essendon, I think they played them last week, I'm pretty sure. They played them in the last couple of weeks. They played against Carlton last week on the weekend on the Saturday, but they do end up playing the Giants. And then obviously after that, I will have a look actually, give me a moment. I think it's Port Adelaide, I think is the other one that they play against in the last round, but I will have a look for you. Yeah, Port Adelaide. Yeah, so Port Adelaide on the Saturday, I believe, and then obviously the makeup game for the opening round game, obviously due to the cyclone, will be on the Wednesday, the week after the weekend of the 23rd, 24th. So I believe that might be the 28th of August that they'll be playing their last game, the Gold Coast. Yeah, percentage wise, obviously we are actually third last into the top 8, including the top 9, I should say, including the Western Bulldogs. So, but obviously with the wins that we've got, we are very susceptible to dropping out completely. If we do lose one of these 2 games and the Western Bulldogs do win both of their last games, because the Western Bulldogs, I believe, go and play the West Coast Eagles next week. Excuse me. And then play Fremantle, I think, the week after. And they play in the last, I think, almost the last game of the last round as well. Obviously, not counting the Suns Essendon game on the Wednesday. I think they they play not next Sunday, but the Sunday after, the Western Bulldogs, and they play against Fremantle. So realistically, that game, those two games, I believe those two games plus obviously Hawthorn, they're playing the Lions, I think, in the last round or something like that. I think they play the Lions in the last round, Hawthorn. So ultimately, there's like 3 or 4 games, including some of the games this week, that will really matter. Obviously, Adelaide versus Collingwood. Obviously, Collingwood losing 4 out of the last 5 games, lost against Hawthorn, which obviously made Hawthorn consolidate their spot in the top 8 in a pretty convincing win over Collingwood. So our percentage is actually better than the Brisbane Lions at the moment, because they ended up losing against the Swans at the Gabba, which doesn't usually happen. It was a very close game. It ended up being only 2 points by the end of it, but it looked like that the Swans could have won by a little bit more than that. And then Fremantle as well. They've only got 1.4 in terms of percentage in front of the Brisbane Lions, but they obviously, with the extra win that they got yesterday against Port Adelaide, sorry, not yesterday, Saturday, keep thinking it's Sunday, but it's Monday, they jumped 2 points ahead of the Brisbane Lions, because obviously the Brisbane Lions got the draw earlier this year against North Melbourne. So it ends up being that the 4 right now is the Crows, the Cats, Collingwood, and Fremantle. Now, ultimately, it's going to be very interesting because obviously with Geelong, they could jump to the top of the ladder if the Adelaide Crows do lose to Collingwood. And obviously, I think that Collingwood will kind of step up a little bit in their game on the Saturday night against the Crows. But it is a game that will determine who is in top spot, because obviously the Crows are in front in terms of percentage right now, and 1 game clear in front of the Geelong Cats, because obviously they won yesterday against the West Coast Eagles, whereas if they dropped that game, ultimately they wouldn't have as much of a percentage booster, because obviously it ended up only being 9 points, I think, by the end of it. Their percentage wouldn't be as high. It'd still be probably over the Cats at the moment, because obviously they're like 2.5% in front. It's 142.4 to 139.8. So it's not too much difference there, but obviously that extra game in hand as well, is helping them. But Collingwood, if they end up winning, obviously they'll go to 64 points. Geelong win against Sydney Swans, they'll also jump to 64 points. And then Fremantle have the Brisbane Lions as well. So that's another game that will decide the top 4, and especially even the top 8 as well, because whoever loses that game will be very, very close and very nervous in terms of dropping out of the top 8, because ultimately, yes, Brisbane do have the 2 points in front of the Suns, Hawthorn, and the Giants right now, and obviously 6 points in front of the Western Bulldogs at the present moment. But if Brisbane end up losing to Fremantle, and I think that's a game at Optus Stadium, Fremantle obviously will jump into the points race with the 64 points. And Brisbane will stay on 58 points. And especially because obviously the Suns have the extra game in hand, you'd almost think that game would give them 4 points, because they do go up against Essendon. But they probably will rest a couple of players, I would imagine, in that game. They will also go to 60, so they will jump the Brisbane Lions, who are in 5th right now, to 6th. And then obviously if Hawthorn and the Giants win, especially against Melbourne, obviously, is what Hawthorn play next week, and obviously the Suns is what the Giants play. The Giants and Hawthorn also move up to 60 as well, so they'll jump them as well, and Brisbane Lions will be on the edge of the 8. They will actually be in 8th if the Western Bulldogs obviously win against the West Coast Eagles, which you would think that they would, but you never know in this instance. So it will go down to the last round, and obviously it'll be Brisbane and Hawthorn, and then obviously the Western Bulldogs against Fremantle in the last round as well. So it'll come down to the last round if Brisbane lose to Fremantle this coming week. So very, very, very big games coming up in the next couple of weeks. And ultimately that win, we just got to keep on winning. Now, ultimately, I think if we do win one of our past two, one of our next two, which obviously we go up against the Suns, and then obviously go up against the Saints in the last round, I think we consolidate our spot if we win one of the two games. Ultimately, obviously, the Western Bulldogs will have to win both of their last two games to get in, which obviously will leave them with 60 points. So realistically, they will want either Hawthorn, the Giants, to lose one of their last two. Will want the Suns to lose two of their last three, or will want Brisbane Lions to lose both of their next two games, because they can't get in terms of where the table is right now. They can't really get in any other way. Ultimately, I think it is from obviously Adelaide have already confirmed their spot in the finals, because obviously they won yesterday, so they actually confirmed. They haven't confirmed top spot, but they have confirmed a finals berth, so they're right. You'd think Geelong would probably do that against the Swans next week. Collingwood could almost consolidate their spot by obviously winning against the Crows and keeping the race for the minor premiership alive. And then obviously Fremantle will play against Brisbane. If Fremantle win, they almost consolidate their spot. I don't know if I think they 100% do if they do win against the Lions, because obviously they're on 60 points right now. But yeah, it's one of those things where you don't know at this point, because a bunch of those teams in front of the Western Bulldogs, it's kind of out of their hands. Obviously, they still have to win the two games that they've got coming up, the Western Bulldogs, but they want one of the teams in front of them, if not multiple, to lose in front of them. And I mean, there is some tough games coming up for a lot of those sides, but it's really, really going to be really difficult for them to get in. Obviously, by percentage, they'll get in easy. They can push pretty much everybody. If they end up winning their next two games and they get to 60 points, if any of the teams in front of them, whether it's Geelong, Collingwood, or Fremantle, I think it goes up to, they will go up to third if every other team in front of them lose all their games, which is pretty much impossible, because some of those teams in front of them do play each other. So, but at the moment, in terms of percentage, right now, if they ended up winning their two games, obviously they'd go to 60 points. And you'd think they get a little percentage booster. They possibly could even jump into second with 135.4 right now. But you'd think they'd jump almost 4% in terms of 139.8 over the Cats. It's just obviously the points and wins, obviously, for the Western Bulldogs. But thankfully for GWS, they are one step closer to playing in finals with a 54-point win over North Melbourne. Excuse me, over North Melbourne and Canberra. But obviously we go to the Gold Coast next week on the Saturday to play against the Suns in the second leg of the Expansion Cup. And arguably, if the first one was very important, this one is even more important for both teams. I think less so for the Suns, more so for the Giants. Obviously the Suns have got an extra game, but they still want a top four spot, and obviously playing against Port Adelaide, you never know. And I think Port Adelaide are playing at home in that game as well. And then obviously playing Essendon in the game after the last round for the Suns. They're looking for a top four spot right now. Obviously, they are a game adrift for going to the ladder and not the fixture. They're a game adrift right now because obviously they have 56 points, but second leg of the Expansion Cup, very important time for it to come for both teams, and it's almost do or die basically for the Giants at this point, because they'll have to win the next round, obviously against the Saints, to get in if they lose next week on Saturday. So 54-point win for the Giants over North Melbourne in Canberra. And we've actually got more to talk about because actually the FA Community Shield actually was up for grabs for Liverpool against Crystal Palace last night, actually at midnight this morning. So they will end up playing. I wasn't feeling great last night. Felt like I had pain in the gut. But so they were playing at about the same time I was trying to actually get into bed and try and sleep properly. And I actually was up at halftime. And they were up at halftime. They were up 2-1 at halftime. But it ended up going 2-2 in full time and full time in extra time as well. And Crystal Palace ended up winning 3-2 on penalties against Liverpool. So they end up getting the Community Shield for the year. Ultimately, I hear that there has been a curse with the Community Shield in terms of teams that have won it the last couple of years and not winning the league. So ultimately, you can cross off Crystal Palace, I guess, for that, if that is to be believed. But yeah, it's not a great way to lose penalties, as I've said previously in other videos. Losing in penalties is always awful. It's not a great way to lose like a big, like a finals type game. And obviously the Community Shield obviously is a trophy that some teams will pretty much a lot of teams will want to win. But it is one of those things where, it is the first silverware of the year. Crystal Palace end up getting it, which is great for Crystal Palace. I think that they have been playing some really good footy and obviously won against Melbourne City in the FA Cup. So they did really well for themselves in the last few months. But what I didn't know was actually the Premier League is back next week. It's back next weekend. So I was very surprised to see that roll up and be like, oh shit, it's actually that soon. Holy damn. So, so it is one of those things, obviously. We did relatively okay. I think that Liverpool obviously could have played much better than they did. Obviously with penalties, a few of the normal goal kickers missed, including Salah. Salah actually missed a penalty as well. Apparently hit it skyward. I didn't watch any of the highlights of the game, so I don't know. So not an ideal situation. Obviously, that means 5-4 in terms of including penalties in the goals as well. But not a bad result. Obviously, a good warm-up, obviously leading into the actual Premier League season proper, which obviously they play on, I believe they play on Saturday morning. But I will have a look for you. Give me a moment. I believe that they play on Saturday morning. I'm just going to try and get it up here. Yes, they do. Yeah, Saturday morning, my time at 5 a.m. So I don't think that the first game of the start of the Premier League, but they are pretty close to one of the starting games. But yeah, so we'll see how they go next week, and obviously we'll be talking about the Premier League once again starting next week. So yeah, but 3-2, obviously 3-2 in penalties that they lost, ended up being 2-2 in the main game for Liverpool, with a loss to Crystal Palace in the FA Cup, FA Community Shield game. Obviously, it's just before the Premier League starts, so good on Crystal Palace for winning a piece of silverware before the season actually starts. And that'll be it for this extra long episode of How's My Team. Again, I'd like to apologise for rambling in some instances, but can't help it. You know that I like to talk sometimes, and when I'm talking about stuff that I'm passionate about, happens a lot in videos where I do talk quite a bit. So yeah, obviously the Giants being the only team that's won for me. Obviously, the Wanderers I don't think have played quite yet. I think they play tomorrow in the Australia Cup, if not today. But I believe it is Tuesday. So we'll probably talk about them. We'll talk about them next week. But yeah, we'll see how we go. But we have a few things obviously to talk about next week. Obviously, with Premier League starting up again for Liverpool, who go up against Bournemouth in their title defense year of season 25-26, and we'll see how Liverpool go. Obviously, still have the AFL season still going with a couple of rounds to go, and obviously the Titans men trying to avoid the wooden spoon, whereas the women trying to just climb the ladder, try and climb the ladder in their own right, being fourth last and ninth in their respective competition. So yeah, plenty to talk about next week. But with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this video and this episode of How's My Team. This has been Mario Man 2100. Mario Man 2100. You guys have a great day or night, and of course, take care. It's just another outro that gets screwed up again. Yay.